WNST, not just around the country, but certainly in Owings Mills, as well as the Ravens allowed a press release to be released, and Luke Jones, Jimmy Smith, and domestic something, although we're not sure exactly what it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to make a distinction here, but to not diminish it in the process. It's out there very much, and in the overall statement that was made that the Ravens put out there, that this was evidence of threatening and emotionally abusive behavior by Smith toward his former girlfriend. And this goes back to last year. The Sun had put out a custody case that had been contentious between Smith and his former girlfriend, the mother of his first child. And clearly the NFL was monitoring this. They were investigating this, and they found evidence of him making threats. They found evidence of him being emotionally abusive, but they did not find evidence of him being violent towards her. Now, that doesn't mean that he wasn't violent towards her. We don't know. And ultimately, I'm not sure the Ravens know. But
I don't think we ever know unless there's a videotape from Atlantic City.
Video,
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, as far as the Ravens, as this pertains to the Ravens, in their statement, they said that they fully supported the league's decision. They called Jimmy Smith's behavior inappropriate and wrong, and then they spelled out the steps that they've taken to come to the determination, at least at this point. And again, if something else comes out, whether it's the TMZ video that's as abrupt and clear-cut as the Ray Rice saga 4 years ago, and you hope it's nothing to that degree, or other information that comes out, putting that possibility aside, they said that they've consulted with relationship and domestic violence experts. They've convened with a group of men and women from the organization that aren't tied to football. They've gone through it. Jimmy has been screened. They've left open the possibility of him seeking follow-up care or treatment. So they've spelled out all these different steps to basically come to the conclusion to say, that's why it's okay, we're going to keep him. And after what happened with Ray Rice 4 years ago, they better be right. And, I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Right, yeah. I mean, I guess everyone sort of cringes a little bit in the Me Too world. The world's different than when Ray Rice was part of the beginning of the world not tolerating that any longer. And certainly it probably should have been that way all along, but at a point where the Dallas Cowboys and the Carolina Panthers were involved in signing fellas who had a very similar situation. Terrell Suggs had some allegations about him that I still, when I see him in the locker room, I think, bleach, girlfriend, Ray Rice is persona non grata forever, right? Like, he hadn't been heard from in 5 years, so it doesn't show up very often. I don't know how Jimmy Smith's going to react to this, or the fans are going to react to this, or the league's going to react to this, or road fans are going to react. I don't know what the modern temperature is. I know it's unacceptable. That's all I know. I don't even know what to say about it, really.
Yeah, and again, just because we make the distinction that there was no evidence found of physical violence against her doesn't mean that threatening her and being emotionally abusive is acceptable whatsoever. I want to be very clear about that. So is there a distinction? Yes. Does that mean that this is nothing? Absolutely not, and it shouldn't be treated that way. And from that sense, is there growth then that the Ravens have taken on this tone, whereas 4 years ago with Ray Rice, when it was very apparent that he had struck her? Now, to what degree? Maybe we all didn't realize, or at least some of us didn't realize, or specifically the Ravens didn't realize how severe until the video came out and they were caught with their pants down. But it's at least, I suppose, good to see that they've taken these measures, they've taken these steps before just opening the door back up for them and saying, well, Jimmy, we love you, and we like Jimmy Smith. They clearly didn't take that kind of a tone. But again, it's great to say that you've made all these different. You've taken all these measures, taken these steps, talked to all these people, and then more evidence comes out saying that this was way worse than what they're indicating it to be right now, which isn't good. So, again, it's uncomfortable. It's difficult. I think, and I saw a lot of people making this comment on Tuesday night that, would the Ravens have gone through these steps if it was a reserve defensive tackle? Of course not.
Well, the first thing we would say is, this is all about stature, always, right?
Sure,
always.
And we always talk about that quotient. I mean, you go back to what Brian Billick would talk about, with a guy like a Chris McAllister, for example, where, maybe not something to this degree, but clearly he had his issues. And, you put up with certain things because a player is, because of their stature, because of how good they are, and then you get to a point where you start to get to that time, that balance, that quotient isn't nearly as advantageous as it was at one time. And I think, speaking about this through a football lens and not wanting to diminish the severity of what went down between Jimmy and his former girlfriend, you are talking about a player who's 30 years old now. This will now be the third straight year he's played no more than 12 games, and coming off of an Achilles.
And much like Chris McAllister, all the ability in the world,
Sure.
and has been a really nice player, has been a really good player, has been an impactful player. I think certainly you go back to the Super Bowl, right? But not what was average. Not not going to the Hall of Fame. Not Ed Reed at the bottom of the first round. I don't know what else to say for a lot of different reasons. But the question would be, how much longer will the Ravens put him on the field, right?
Right, and that's what's going to be interesting from a football standpoint, from a business standpoint. Again, not trying to diminish the severity of this and to make it sound like it's, okay, we're moving on.
Yeah, but there comes a point where what does it mean to the football team, right?
Sure. I mean, you're talking about a player who is set to make $9 million in base salary this year. Now, because of a suspension, which is without pay, they will recoup that prorated portion of the his cap figure, his prorated portion of his signing bonus this year, but they'll also recoup $2.375 million that they're not going to pay him now in his base salary. His cap figure before this went down was to be $15.35 million. Next year, set to make $9.5 million, and his cap figure goes up to about $15.9 million. So you are talking about, and we were talking about this possibility even before this situation surfaced and it was becoming apparent that he was going to be suspended. We were already talking about just his availability because of health reasons. Now you throw this into the mix. Put it this way. Jimmy Smith is going to have to show a hell of a lot on the field and going to have to show a hell of a lot off the field that he's learned from this and he is a changed man, which how much of that is going to be proved to be authentic in a matter of a few months, I don't know. I'm as skeptical as anyone in that regard, but he has a heck of a lot to show for me to be confident to think that he's going to be a Baltimore Raven in 2019 because of the injuries and now because of this, which is a far more concerning matter altogether.
Well, it's interesting. They draft Humphrey last year, and unlike drafting to replace Joe Flacco, which is what the Lamar Jackson thing was allegedly, until we've actually watched it play out. The notion was that they were drafting him as a complimentary player, right, to Jimmy Smith. The truth is, they're always drafting your replacement, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it's. You're always one play away. I mean, I think look at the quarterback position. Look at a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, who 3 years ago looked like he was an ascending player that, wasn't going to be the best quarterback in the NFL, but certainly the Minnesota Vikings were happy with
He was
what
going to
they
be
had.
A Kirk Cousins type of guy, right? Like a guy that other teams would want.
He had taken them to the playoffs, and he looked like he was at the very least an above-average quarterback. And then you saw what happened with his knee, which was a pretty innocuous kind of mechanism for that. He just dropped back in the pocket, and his knee gave out and was torn to shreds. And you see where he is now. I mean, he's a backup quarterback trying to reestablish any semblance of value. So you're always one play away. But it is, I guess there's some semblance of comfort the Ravens can take that they do have Marlin Humphrey, who I think is someone who had already tabbed as a guy that, to me, looks the part of a future number one corner. Now, the problem is he needs to play that way now, and he needs to be that way now. And as much as I look at their cornerback situation and say, well, it sure beats 2014 when they had a diminished version of Ladarius Webb and Rashawn Melvin in place of Jimmy Smith. It sure beats 2016 when it was a rookie Tavon Young and Sharice Wright at corner. So you look at Marlin Humphrey and Brandon Carr, and you say, okay, that still looks pretty good on paper, but to the point you just made, when you drafted Humphrey a year ago, you were at least envisioning the thought that he might be able to pair with Jimmy Smith, and the Ravens might have the best cornerback tandem in the NFL in a couple years. Now it's much more a case of they need Marlon Humphrey to look like a number one corner. One, because Jimmy Smith's not going to be on the field weeks 1 through 4, and, oh, yeah, you're playing at Cincinnati, so A.J. Green. You're playing Denver, so Demaryius Thomas, and you're playing at Pittsburgh, Antonio Brown. So 2 big AFC North road games, and you're not going to have your top corner. So there's going to be some drop-off. There's no question about that. And
I guess the other question is, how good is Jimmy Smith right now, too, right?
Well, and that's fair, too.
Yeah.
But there's certainly going to be some drop-off, and anyone just saying, well, the Ravens have a lot of depth, they're going to be fine. Well, you haven't been paying attention the last few years. I think they can endure. I think they can survive. I don't think they're going to go 0-4 without them, but we've also talked about the importance of this team getting off to a good start and being in a position where they're going into the bye week where they're a few games over 500 rather than 4-5, 5-4, and you're needing to nearly win out to make the playoffs, and that's a position they've kind of found themselves in here in recent years, and they haven't been good enough. So they need Humphrey certainly to play at a really high level. They need Brandon Carr, who's a year older, who is solid. He's a dependable number 2 corner, but he's also on the wrong side of 30. So
it was a point where a couple weeks ago where you were like, hey, I might trade him, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I guess
deep depth at cornerback. You haven't written that story ever.
Right, and it shows how fleeting that can be. But this also explains why the Ravens a few weeks back, remember they had brought Bashaud Breeland in for a visit, the former Washington starting corner, who isn't a great player, but he's a starting caliber corner, and we were all kind of wondering, why are they doing this? And, you know, I even speculated at the time, I didn't know this, so I'm not taking credit for it, but it was one of those things that felt weird enough to think, do they have someone who's about to be suspended? Is there some kind of disciplinary thing going on? Because it didn't add up. Now, we don't know if they're going to sign Breeland, and he may still elect to hold out for a better offer elsewhere, but with the Ravens now knowing they're not going to have Jimmy Smith for 4 games, makes it all the more important that Humphrey builds on what he did as a rookie. Brandon Carr at least maintains where he was last year. And now you're looking with a little more urgency at the likes of Tavon Young, Maurice Kennedy, Anthony Averett, who I think have all had good preseasons, but now you're even looking to a guy like Stanley Jean-Baptiste, who has had a pretty nice summer and in the past certainly would have been in the conversation to make the roster. At this point, I wasn't expecting him to make it, but now perhaps you keep him around because he is an outside corner. He does have some length, and not that he's going to be playing, and you hope he's not going to be playing on Sundays, but now you might have to tap into a little more of that depth, and it's another difficult decision you're going to have to make. But, I mean, clearly this is not good off the field big time, and it's not good on the field. If there is a silver lining, it is that they did draft Marlon Humphrey a year ago. As much as so many of us, and myself included, looked at that pick at the time and said, well, is that really their biggest need? Well, with Jimmy Smith's injury history and now with his off-field character kind of taking a major hit and starting to wonder about that, it's good they have Marlon Humphrey, because if not, you'd be looking at this in a far more pessimistic light.
Yeah, why did they draft a cornerback last year? Well, there you have it. Remember when that was not a popular pick?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was just saying, that was a pick that, because it had come on the heels of Brandon Carr being signed in free agency.
Well, everybody wanted a wide receiver, right? That's what we've wanted for 5 years in the draft, right? Everybody wanted...
and that's a completely fair thing to say. I mean, it is. I mean, take a look at how the wide receivers that they drafted this year, Jaleel Scott and Jordan Lastly, neither one of them has been all that impressive. So I hear that, and look, I've been banging the table for them to invest more at that position for a long, long time, but it is interesting how these things, I don't want to say work themselves out, because again, this is self-inflicted. This isn't Jimmy Smith tearing his ACL the third preseason game or tearing his Achilles last year. This was something self-inflicted, and I don't want to diminish the severity of that or try to be flippant about that at all, but it is good that the Ravens have the depth that they do have, but I'm not convinced that's not going to prevent them from having drop-off there. And face it, as much as we've talked about this offense and improving and there being some cautious optimism, this is still very much a team that's going to be leaning on its defense if they want to get to where they want to go and get back to the playoffs. It's clearly still the strength, and that strength is going to be tested. That depth is going to be tested big time here in September.
Luke Jones can be found on Baltimore Luke on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. I want to remind everybody that Chicken Palooza is going on. It ends on the 31st. I have my Chicken Palooza shirt. Big thanks to Frank and Ed for sending this over. It's actually Houston Oiler blue, too, so it's pretty cool. Chicken Palooza through the 31st. Chicken for a year. Oh, and by the way, they're donating a portion of every box sold to the Johns Hopkins Children's Center, and that's a pretty cool thing they're doing, a Chicken Palooza. So check it out. ROFO, real fast, real fresh, real fast, and the ROFO rewards card and the app. Make sure you're downloading that. I got to get back to getting some. I haven't had Western fries in like 3 weeks. I'm having withdrawal around here. Also brought to you by our friends at King Discount Liquors. Give the King a ring out there on Pulaski Highway in Rosedale. Lottery beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore as well. Shout out to our friends at Costas Inn as well. Big doings last week as they had a little national exposure as well. Anytime I see the Crabs rolling out on national TV, it's Costas Inn. They've been doing it down there forever. The pit beef, the bands, the real East Side flavor, and, of course, the crabs and the crab cakes. Costas Inn. Go say hello to Nick and Pete. Tell them we said hello. Luke, for this game on Saturday and the quick turnaround, I guess Ronnie Stanley, in addition to Jimmy Smith putting himself squarely into the news this week, Ronnie Stanley getting back on the field, feels like they've escaped this one, right?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know if he's going to play Saturday night, but it looks like John Harbaugh's initial indication was accurate. He did undergo some more testing, but it sounds like just a mild knee sprain. Now, based on if you go back and watch, it was during the extra point early in that second quarter where a Colts player kind of fell into him, was knocked into him. Just one of those type of plays where, to me, maybe it's a mild MCL sprain. I mean, that was kind of the way that he was hit would indicate that's what it was. And if that's the case, that's something that can be a couple weeks. But I would think he should be fine for Week 1. We'll get a little more clarity here over the next couple days. But I would think the Ravens, especially with the quick turnaround, they're not going to push it with Stanley, and they shouldn't. So as much as you'd like to have them out there, as this is kind of going to be the last preseason action for the starters, you clearly want to be careful here and use some precaution and make sure he's right for Week 1. But, yeah, it looks like the Ravens dodged a bullet, but it is a reminder that offensive line depth, I think everyone looks at their top 6 and says, okay, I think there's some potential there, but I think there's still a lot of questions after that. And, again, the Ravens aren't unique to that. That's kind of the story around the NFL in this day and age.
Well, you lose Asemele, you lose Wagner, you lose Jensen. Every year you're losing a $7 to $10 million player. They don't grow on trees. And when you start drafting the Stanleys and you draft the Alex Lewises to make some space there, you need to see those guys get on the field because Marshall Yonder's not here forever, right?
Right. And you need to see Ronnie Stanley stay on the field. I mean, I think the one knock on him, not that he's missed a ton of games, but he has been someone who's been banged up a good bit. And I feel if you watch his play, he'll get to a point where he's ascending, and you're starting to say, okay, he looks like he's knocking on the door of being a Pro Bowl caliber left tackle, and then something happens. It was the foot his rookie year. Last year, I believe he had a concussion. There's always something that's kind of holding him back, in a way similar to how we've talked about Jimmy Smith in the past, just about the injuries. So he needs to stay on the field. The good news is this knee injury, not anything catastrophic. Doesn't sound like it's going to be something that's going to put him in peril for the start of the season, but it does remind you that the depth on this offensive line, and specifically at left tackle, it's tenuous. I mean, if he's not out there, who do they play? Is it James Hurst? We've seen that story. Is it Alex Lewis? Maybe. Is it Greg Senat, the rookie 6th-round pick? You can't imagine he's ready yet. So, would they flip Orlando Brown Jr. to the left side, which was his position in college? I don't know, but none of those options are nearly as encouraging, and still near the confidence that Ronnie Stanley being on the field does. So you hope he's back sooner rather than later, and it sounds like he should be.
All right. Any other Miami thoughts? I mean, I haven't put one thought into the Miami Dolphins other than, Jarvis Landry's not there anymore. I've seen him on Hard Knocks. These preseason games, we never really look much at what the other team is doing, but this is their third preseason game. They're going to have starters out there the first half. I mean, they're going to get a good shot, and I think the Ravens, when they've had their best players on the field in these 3 preseason games, I think it's been you look at them and say this is a decent football team. It's a good team. I don't know that I feel that way about the Dolphins, but I feel like this is the closest it's going to look to real football, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the Ravens got a pretty good test against Indianapolis in terms of their starters playing. Now, I think you could certainly say Andrew Luck's still knocking off the rust, and rightfully so, considering he didn't play at all last year. But this is a Dolphins team that's very much in transition. That much is clear. I think it's going to be interesting to see what Ryan Tannehill looks like. He played some against, I think they played Tampa Bay in their last preseason game, or their first preseason game, but he's going to get some extensive action. But, yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that. I never really look at the opponent unless it happens to be someone the Ravens are playing that season. And even then, it's a preseason game. I mean, you're not really focused on the opponent. But with it being the third preseason game for Miami and the Ravens being their 4th preseason game, it's certainly going to be a good look for them. I don't think you're going to see the starters play as long as they normally do in the traditional third preseason game, but we're still going to see the starters play quite a bit, and this will be the last tune-up. This will be the last time we see Joe Flacco and Terrell Suggs and Eric Weddle, and go down the list of all your meaningful starters, because we know that that final preseason game, the 5th preseason game this year, probably not going to see many starters at all, and it's going to be a very much a backup-heavy game in Baltimore, which I'm sure we're going to be looking forward to big time on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm about done with this, but I
was done. I was done after the first one. After seeing Flacco the first time, I'm ready for some real football. But 2 more of these, and we're counting down and a little over 2 weeks away.
What are we going to see cornerback-wise without Jimmy? I mean, where's Jalen Hill in all of this? I mean, is there somebody else out there, a name that we're seeing slide in a positive direction in that way?
Well, I think, it's clearly going to be Marlin Humphrey and Brandon Carr as the starters. By all accounts, Tavon Young has looked good this summer. He's going to be the slot corner, which, if you recall, was his best position his rookie year. He's looked good coming back from the ACL. They have Maurice Kennedy, who's kind of that guy that can flip between the inside and the outside. So, he's been a little banged up, but he's certainly someone, I think, who proved himself to be capable the second half of last year. I think in terms of just a roster spot, the guy that I would point to now who might make the roster who wasn't going to is Stanley Jean-Baptiste, who has played pretty well in the preseason, has had a pretty nice summer. He's an outside corner that has some height, so he might sneak onto the roster. Anthony Averett, their 4th-round pick, has had a really nice summer. He's played well. He played really well against Indianapolis the other night. You mentioned Jalen Hill. He's on PUP. He hasn't fully recovered from the knee yet. John Harbaugh has already said he's going to start the year on PUP, so he won't be in play until at least week 7. And a lot of that's going to depend. Where are they with Jimmy Smith? Where are they with the rest of their cornerback group? So, there's still the possibility of a guy like Brashad Breeland, who is out on the free agent market still, has had certain demands from a contractual standpoint that no team's been willing to meet just yet. But the Ravens expressed some interest a few weeks back, which was clearly a tell that they knew that this was a possibility with Smith. So it's possible they bring him in. I'm not convinced that they definitely will, but certainly they have some depth here that's going to be tested. It's great to talk about your cornerback depth until it needs to be tested. Then you realize, is it really depth? Or is it inventory? I tend to think that the Ravens do have some quality depth here, but you're not going to replace Jimmy Smith and think that there's not going to be some drop-off. There's definitely going to be, and I think the big key is going to be, does Marlin Humphrey play like a true number one corner? Does he continue to ascend after a strong rookie year? And can Brandon Carr hold off Father Time a little more? And, don't leave Brandon Carr on an island with Antonio Brown come week 4.
It's probably not going to end well for us. I mean, I just booked our hotel that night, and I'm thinking, like, how are we going to feel when we get back to that hotel room, after that game on Sunday? It usually dictates our mood for the year, doesn't it?
Well, it's pivotal. I mean, and I think, one thing I'll say, and we haven't talked too much about the Steelers, they're a team that has a lot of question marks on the defensive side of the ball right now. They didn't really replace Ryan Shazier. Their safety position's really, I don't want to say a mess, but is very much in flux. I mean, I'm not penciling in Pittsburgh to be a 12-win team this year. I think they're going to come back to the pack a little bit.
We've been saying that every year. Don't we every year sort of just a little bit underestimate them?
I mean, I haven't the last couple years, but I'm not as high on them this year as I was the last couple years. And I'm a little bit higher on the Ravens than I've been the last couple of years. So, does that mean the Ravens are 10-6 and Pittsburgh's 11-5? Does that mean the Ravens can catch up to Pittsburgh? And maybe you're talking about a tiebreaker scenario where, you want to try to go to Pittsburgh and get a win. If you can, you're really putting yourself not in the driver's seat, but you're putting yourself in really good position. But of course, not having Jimmy Smith available for that game, that's a different animal now, trying to slow down that passing attack.
All right, Luke can be found, Luke at WNST.net, and Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. Big thanks to our friends at Royal Farms for sponsoring all that we do here at WNST.net. I'm wearing my Chicken Palooza shirt. I'll be taking some fun pictures on social. I'm going to go get some chicken this weekend as well. Western fries. A reminder that Chicken Palooza ends on the 31st of the month. It's chicken for a year, and also some great contributions to the Johns Hopkins Children's Center. By the way, our community and charity series continues on Thursday mornings around here. It's all brought to you by Cole Roofing and Pfister Energy, a great piece that we did with Bill Cole out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. You may hear it around here as well. Lots of new sponsors here at WNST. Our friends at Sporticulture are going to have some fantastic NFL licensed flowers behind me on my set next week. Also, Charles Newsonoff and Sunsets 1923. Doing it right over there. Sydney will be around. We're going to talk to him a little later on as well, whether you're getting engaged or celebrating your 50th birthday or anniversary. Charles Newsonoff and Sons has been in Parkville a long, long time. You can find them at charlesnewsonoff.com. The Model Lyric also hosting John Cusack in a couple of weeks, as well as Steely Dan to kick off my 50th birthday anniversary celebration October 11th, as well as Kansas and David Ragsdale, who plays the violin in the band Kansas now. That's out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault as well. If you love sports, if you love news, if you want it quick, it's down and dirty, and in your email each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and the Maryland Jockey Club. It is the WNST morning newspaper. And, of course, Laurel is open this weekend, and the Maryland Million on October the 20th. So make sure you're circling that on your calendar. And we got the racetrack out at Timonium as well. But Laurel has that sports bar, air conditioned on the hot days, and completely renovated. If you haven't been out of Laurel in a while, you haven't been, go to Laurel Park. Learn more at the front of WNST.net, where we run the Laurel entries daily, as well as in our morning newspaper. Any breaking news happens first on the WNST text service. Got to get on that. You would have found that about the Jimmy Smith suspension first. It's true. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard, and Dennis Colazzos will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home, getting you ready for the weekend and more fake football against Miami on Saturday night. But I swear, 2 weeks from now, it's all real football all the way out, even if Jimmy Smith's not playing the first month. The Jimmy Smith story is there. We have been breaking that out on our WNST text service, as well as out at WNST.net, where you can feedback. I am on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube, WNSTV channel. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.